me, there's a vast global movement starting with the period in the United States where a lot of top jurists wanted to impeach and develop the case why George W. Bush should be impeached. I just say the names Abu Ghraib, Guantanamo Bay, Bugram, dark sites, rendition, ghost prisoners. These terms, which speak of crimes against humanity, war crimes committed in the name of the global war on terror by the superpower, the military superpower in the world, these invoke in people's imagination, and rightfully so, images of terrible violations, crimes against humanity. Think of that idea, crimes that are so serious that they aren't just against the individuals involved, they're against all of humankind. In my lifetime, I have never seen a crime spree at the highest level. I think it really, the metaphor is organized crime. That we're seeing an orgy of organized crime that makes Al Capone's Chicago look like child's play in comparison. So I could talk about Francis Boyle, I could talk about Michael Mandel, I could talk about Ramsey Clark, I could talk about many esteemed jurists who agree that George W. Bush and his war cabinet, including Donald Rumsfeld, Dick Cheney, Condoleezza Rice, Paul Wolfowitz, these are credibly accused war criminals. And I say credibly accused because the theory is, as we used to respect, that you're not guilty, that you're innocent until proven guilty. And these individuals haven't been subjected to trials. We don't take the position like the Bush White House did, that people can be designated as unlawful enemy combatants and simply put in dungeons and tortured with no due process, complete violations of everything that we've built up, the small little protections we've had for human rights, for civil liberties, habeas corpus. We haven't had trials, but we need to find, as humanity, ways to put George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld on the witness stand to face accusers, and I would put myself among them, along with Lawyers Against War, along with Splitting the Sky, along with many, many international jurists, esteemed international jurists, who would allege that we're dealing here with credibly accused war criminals.
Okay. Now, I understand that George Bush came to speak in Calgary March 17th, 2009. The police would not arrest him as a war criminal. So the Mohawk activists Splitting the Sky attempted to do so, and in the process, Splitting the Sky was charged with obstruction of justice.
But there was so much lead up to that question. If you'll bear with me, let me go back into some history of how we found ourselves in the position that we're in right now. Several weeks before George W. Bush came to Calgary, I got a phone call from Splitting the Sky. And he told me that this was going to happen, that the former U.S. president was going to be coming to Calgary. And this was quite shocking to hear that the first major public presentation that the former U.S. president would give, now as a private citizen, was going to happen right in one's own front door. I live in Lethbridge, Alberta. I work at University of Lethbridge. It's about 130 miles from Calgary. So very quickly after having that discussion and having a lot of discussions leading up to it, Splitting the Sky and myself, I went to work on an academic paper. I was invited to give a presentation at University of Winnipeg, and I gave that presentation on March the 6th, and the paper is entitled, "Should George W. Bush be arrested in Calgary, Alberta, and tried for international crimes?" So that academic paper, which appeared in a number of websites, was translated into French and VoltaireNet, was part of an organizational process that we engaged in together We connected with Lawyers Against War. Lawyers Against War will be Charles Davidson of Lawyers Against War will be representing Splitting the Sky in court. Ramsey Clark, who is Splitting the Sky's friend and lawyer, going back to the days when Splitting the Sky was accused of killing a guard at the Attica prison incident of 1971. Out of the big political controversies and juridical controversies that arose over that, only one person was charged. 43 people died in that incident. That one person charged was Splitting the Sky, John Boncourt. So Ramsey Clark developed a relationship with Splitting the Sky. He sent Splitting the Sky a letter describing his position on credibly accused George W. Bush's position in international law, the fact that he needs to be held responsible and accountable for his actions, and we delivered that letter along with my paper, along with Lawyers Against War's position at a press conference the day before the event on March 17th in Calgary last year. So there was a lot of effort to assemble the evidence, to disseminate the evidence. Lawyers Against War made a point of bringing the evidence to the attention of the relevant officials, right up to the Prime Minister of Canada, Minister of Public Safety, the head of the RCMP, etc., etc. So the officials had the information available, and the case was laid out why George W. Bush is a credibly accused war criminal vis-a-vis a number of international laws and conventions and protocols, the Geneva Conventions, but also according to Canadian domestic law, the Canadian Crimes Against Humanity and War Crimes Act of 2000, premised on the idea that Canada should not be a haven for war criminals. And so there was a demand by myself, by Splitting the Sky, by Lawyers Against War, by Ramsey Clark, by others, to see that the officials in Calgary lived up to their responsibility to enforce the rule of law. And I think this is the fundamental issue at play here. You know, do we have a rule of law, or is the rule of law a sad hoax? Is it simply for street people or poor people or Indian people or minorities, maybe up to the middle class? But the reality seems to be that there's a group of rich and powerful individuals, especially connected to the oil and gas industry, the military-industrial complex, who for all intents and purposes are above the law, who get protection from law enforcement officials rather than subjected to the force of the rule of law. So that was the point we were trying to make. I think that is the key point at the trial that is coming up on Monday, March the 8th. You know, why did George Bush choose to go to Calgary? Is it because Calgary is effectively a colony of Houston and Dallas, a key hinterland in the U.S.-based oil and gas industry, which is notoriously deeply integrated into the military-industrial complex? Did George W. Bush feel that he was coming into such a friendly place, such a kindred community to his own Texas background, that was the reason that community was chosen for the presentation? You know, we felt we had to counter that. Many hundreds of individuals in Calgary and in the area felt we had to counter that. And I think the question is still there: is Canada a sovereign country? Do we really have a neutral judiciary, or will we see a kind of railroading, a kind of kangaroo court, sort of underlining the reality that we may think of ourselves as a sovereign country in Canada, but really we take our orders from elsewhere?